is being recorded.
So we are hosting a meetup next week in Building 16 on the 17th. So we'll be posting that and sending out some communication around that. And so we would really love for you to come by. Basically, it's an hour and a half of your time where we kind of talk through, the best way to identify a problem, how to build a team, and how to get those ideas submitted. So if you haven't considered, please do so. In addition to that, all of you here that have, there's a little bit of is that all of you that are blue badge have 10 tokens that you can invest in the teams. So be sure to do that. Your colleagues are, looking to you to help them get to the next level because only ventures with 200 tokens or more will advance to the selection round. And the end of all of that is if you have wisely invested in ventures that progress through the challenge nicely and you've provided feedback and you've mentored, etc., you also have a chance to win connected recognition of $1,000, which is, not a bad, side token there for contributing. So, again, I encourage all of you to participate. Enjoy today's event, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Uh, Thank you all for coming to October Women in Tech session. There's an echo. I'm not really sure where it's coming from right now, but I will try to figure it out. My name is Serpil Bayraktar, and I'm the program lead for WIT. We've been doing this for 6 years, every month, and I have met a lot of you. I know that we live in the Silicon Valley, we have wonderful jobs, our lives are great, but I also know everybody has a story of their own, and not all of it is fantastic or what it looks like in the social media. So we have a very special guest speaker today that I will have a conversation with, and I'm really happy to bring her over here to talk about something incredibly important and maybe not talked always. So our guest speaker is Tracy Milligan. She's the founder of an international domestic violence and human trafficking organization. She's on the board of directors for United Nations in SF. She's also the chairperson for their Women's Committee. She founded several companies, but she had a very colorful career that includes fashion, music, and even construction. She's here to journey and also what she's doing with all that experience she has gained, and she's going to have a call to action at the end. So please help me welcome Tracy Milligan.
Good afternoon. I am so glad to be here with you and see such a wonderful full room, beautiful people. Well, I was invited to come here today by Ray because I have a good friend who works here. His name he's next door, and he says, "You know what? I have a friend who you guys might want to hear from." I'm very thankful for this opportunity. So a little bit about me. Next slide, please. There's the brooding Tracy at 5 years old. I want to start with that picture. Go back one. Thank you. With who I am. So, yeah, let me start with this picture. So, obviously, little girl, 5 years old there. Like I said, not really wanting to take a picture, not feeling too good. But I share this picture with you because it was at this time when, like many other children, you become more self aware and you look at the world around you. And I was one of those why kids. If any of you have children, I was one of the ones that said, why? And this is where my why started. Is why is the world the way it is?
Sorry, switch to this one. I think that is making a little too much noise. Thank you.
There we go. We're still, yeah, a little bit better. Still some vibrations, but that's okay. So at this point, like I said, I began looking at the world and asking why. Why is there poverty? Why is there war? Why can't I walk my dog through this part of the park? Just why on everything. That was pretty. I was also the one where if I was quiet, you'd better come find me because I was usually taking something apart and trying to figure out how it worked. And at this time, I was on the coast. I had grown up in the Palo Alto area. And I, at the time, of course, didn't know it, but I was very fortunate to be the child that hung out at the very first Apple store. So, of course, I would go home and tell my parents, this is a story I tell, that I had gone in there one day and they had flyers sitting out, printed on yellow construction paper, invest for $5,000 to grow our company. And I took one home and I told my mom, these are the best computers ever. They're going to be big, they're going to be huge. Please invest. She passed. So, yeah, shame on her. In other words, the moral of that story is listen to your kids when they find some really good tech. So now we fast forward, and like I said, if you're here, you probably read my bio, and you see that I was in the military. I did ROTC and was an Army reservist, but I also modeled too at the same time. And during that time, it was a very successful career, but I was also silently living with a violent relationship, domestic violence for 7 years, and it was pretty brutal. And so while on the outside, it looked great. Definitely at that time, if there would have been a hashtag, it would have been hashtag relationship goals. But that was definitely not the home life on the inside. And so I walked away from being financially successful, living in a great place, having a doorman and a nice convertible car, to being on the streets with two kids on the streets of San Francisco. Got back on my feet. And it was in that environment that I said, okay, I really want to make a difference. I know I can. I'm a fighter. I'm an entrepreneur. I can do this. And so that is pretty much what set me up to doing what I'm doing now. Next slide, please. So these are my three companies: Milligan Foundation, Arinda Equal Equity, and Term Payments. So I'll start first with the Milligan Foundation because that's really where my snowball happened to putting me here with you today. So the Milligan Foundation is a international resource to get women to safety. So any organization in the world who with domestic violence and human trafficking can reach out to my organization and say, hey, we have someone that needs to get out of Dodge. And we help them do that. In building that, I knew I wanted it to be big because I think it's physically impossible for me to think small. And I like to try and help everybody. So I wanted to be all inclusive. And so with that, I knew that the only way that I could have the kind of reach that I wanted my organization to have is by utilizing technology. And so I reached out to Salesforce. They're my biggest supporter. But understanding or realizing what I wanted to build out, I had to teach myself a lot of things, more than just how to click through and use an Excel sheet to expert level. Okay, so yes, I do have a library at home that is probably a full-on library of nothing but white papers and all kind of manuals and everything. So my end is self-taught, not going to college of any sort, and probably thousands of hours worth of tutorial videos watched while building out what I wanted to make work. So with that, in the world and not and domestic violence isn't something that people like to talk about, especially women. And I would do events and go places, and women would walk by my table, walk by my booth. It's like, okay, I'm trying to help you guys. What's going on? But there's a part of us that just doesn't even want to address that type of violence. We don't want to acknowledge it if we see it. It's kind of like, nah, 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 nah. It's there. So I had to think, what can I do to make money? Because the donations weren't coming in. And so after I brainstormed a bunch of business ideas, that's when I came up with Term Payments, which is a new online payment processor. I'd knock on some if I could, that will be launched in a few months that actually allows people to shop online with cash. Yes, there is definitely a secret sauce to that. And then finally, Arinda Equal Equity. And Arinda came about actually during the same brainstorm when I was thinking about money. The conversations with friends about what I wanted in life, what I wanted to do, and it seemed like whenever I would reverse engineer it always seemed that the root of it was money. And we all know right now there's a between the haves and the have-nots. And so I thought, how can we fix this? How can we fix the system? How can we fix the system? There's all kind of legislation being put out there, but nothing is working. Nothing is working. And what happens when something doesn't work? You throw it out. You start over again from scratch. And so that's what Orinda Equal Equity aims to do, is to create our own financial and economic ecosystem outside of the existing systems already because those are broken. So we want to create a new one from scratch that's equal from everyone. Next slide, please.
Thank you. Apologize for the sound problems. In the little room, Portrero, the sound is perfect. We should all go there or hire a real sound engineer instead of me. Okay, well, we're going to have to do, I apologize again. But so maybe we can share that one. Yeah. Let's share. Oh, this is for the WebEx. This is much better. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's start with Oranda Ikul. Tell us what the vision for this company is, because it's such a big initiative.
Well, the vision for Orinda is really is equality. So I have not figured out the elevator speech for this yet because it's so all encompassing. My business partner says sustainable community development. I say poverty eradication. And really it's both because the vision behind Orinda is actually taken a little bit from Silicon Valley, and that is how we have these wonderful big work campuses that provide everything, right? You go to Google, you go to Apple, you come here even. I don't know everything that's here, but I know at these campuses you have wonderful lunchrooms, you have on-site gyms, some have childcare, some facilitate education if you would like to continue your education. And you have these companies that provide all of this to their employees. And I wrote a paper a couple years ago called The Decentralized Corporate Structure, where instead of bringing people in from different areas, because I'm sure some of you might have some wicked commutes coming from Oakland or Mountain View or Palo Alto or Berkeley, or maybe even farther out as Antioch and Pittsburgh, but you all have to come here and work. And I do realize that some people are able to work remotely, but I kind of took it a step further and was like, what if everybody could stay where they are to work? What if we still provide the child care, the food, the health care, but leave it where people are? Bring it to them instead of creating big campuses that encompass 10, 15, 20 acres. Do smaller individual campuses that essentially do the same thing but uplift the entire community to not leave anyone behind. And so, really, Orinda took root when China made the announcement that they were no longer going to take the world's recycling. And I thought, that's it. Because if you think of why the United States is where it is because we had the Industrial Revolution, we had the middle class, we had factory. Why is China where they are? Because they copied the United States. They had the middle class, they had the Industrial Revolution, they had the factories there, and they were able to lift themselves up. And again, another why, remember, I'm a why kid. it like this in developing countries, and it's because nobody ever brought that to them. So Orinda aims to bring that, to bring industry into developing countries to create jobs. Now, when I talk about our own economic ecosystem, that's when we get involved in the cryptocurrency. It's because Orinda is going to have its own cryptocurrency. It's called Equal. And that's what we're going to pay everybody in. That's how you are going to have home ownership. That's how you're going to pay for your medical care. That's how you do everything. So, in the current structure or method of cryptocurrency markets, your people who come out with currencies are begging for adoption. Like, please use us for whatever you want to use us for, but please just use us. They're not building in an adoption. With Orinda, we built in that adoption because we're saying if you use our cryptocurrency, you can now pay for your child's education, you can now pay for healthcare, you can now buy a home. So it all starts with recycled products or upcycled products, us taking raw materials. And the first materials we're developing are upcycled bricks or manufactured bricks and manufactured wood to create housing. We've reached out to Plant Prefab. They are a manufactured home developer or builder, excuse me. Their homes are all LEED Platinum certified, and right now we've got our costs down for a home down to $100 a square foot for a LEED Platinum house. This is completely wired, completely plumbed, ready to move in. And so when you say $100 a square foot, and if people have a UBI, once again, also issued in equal currency, it creates a path to home ownership. So the big vision is no more shanty towns, okay? And no more food deserts, enough food for everyone. So I will invite you to go to the Orinda website to look at it because we have it all laid out with hydroponics, with education, with home development, all of that under our ecosystem. And it all starts with recycling, all starts with taking care of the world.
Thank you. That sounds amazing. Um, we are engineers. We like concrete examples. Could you walk us through what it would look like from the end user point of view, or someone who's living in poverty, obviously doesn't have access to a lot of technologies? Can you tell us how you envision it will work from the actual person benefiting from it?
Well, fortunately, I didn't have to do too much study because we all know that really the primary entry point for technology is cellular, is the phone. There's a lot of basic phone systems out there that people have access to. They're low cost, and so that's really our entry point is cell phones and creating internet access or giving people the tools to access the internet because we all know that there are all kind of companies out there that are working to bring internet to remote areas and into developing countries. So now it's about providing a low cost hardware. So the first entry point is a phone. And then we also have another organization that we're working with that has developed a really basic tablet for a very low cost. The operating system behind it only costs $5.
Okay, so I have my phone. What happens next?
So what happens with your phone is you basically choose what Orinda service you want. From I want to say a developed country standpoint, because obviously we've got a lot to build. We can't use our own currency for everything, so we have to continue to use the existing fiat currency. So we'll eventually give people the option to buy into Orinda, and it's just a simple access on the website. So how the currency will be adopted or grow is we will give you access to our marketplace. We've reached out to other women's organizations, women's entrepreneur organizations, where they're allowing women who make their own sandals, make baskets, make jewelry, products, and you'll be able to buy from them using Orinda currency. And they and then can educate their children, buy things for themselves in their own villages. So everything is going to be mobile.
And because the people live in poverty, they don't have the money to buy the services, and they need. How do you handle how do you create the income that they will need to, you will loan it to them? Okay, so this reminds me of the, micro loans that people have been trying for a while now. Okay, okay, that's really interesting. Now, it's a really big vision, Tracy. You started at the global scale to solve things. Why start there?
Well, it's not so much global scale. It's because I want to say the beta is slated to take place in Haiti because United States, unfortunately, isn't that friendly for these type of initiatives. Just because the haves want to keep having, and they don't want to give up anything unless they're still getting. So it's going to someplace a bit more friendly. Plus, because we're working with the contracts that have been left hanging in the recycling market. Haiti's an island. There's shipping there. It's a good point to import raw materials. Their GDP is low. Their unemployment is high. We've got eager people, willing, ready, and waiting to build a new lives for themselves. So it's just a good place to be.
Thank you. Um, we're going to take questions from the room, but I wanted to go through some of the important things. And one of the things that strikes me most is your technical knowledge, being able to utilize the technology in the way that you're doing it. Um, you know, I have been wanting to learn cryptocurrency. I've been wanting to learn this and that, but and I'm an engineer. But there you are, putting all these technologies together. Do you have a technical background? Can you tell us a little bit about where your scientific mind comes from?
Once again, just the why kid. Why does this happen? How does this work? Why does this work? How does this fit together? And really, for me, I like to say my subconscious is a genius. When I see a problem, I immediately want to solve it. And then I immediately want to figure out how to solve it. And then what's the best way to solve it. So I want to say it's my brain that's the technical part. It's like if I sit, then I can visualize the trees. Like I'm a visual learner and I can see the branches. I can internalize the connections. So for me, I walk around with the notepads and everything in every bag, purse, car, trunk. I mean, I have them everywhere. I never leave home without one. And I'm forever taking notes. And sometimes a connection will come to me and I'll actually draw a wireframe. Like I have notes of wireframes on just how things are connected. And then I figure out how they can work and what's the best way to make it happen.
Did you have any technical education background? How did you learn about cryptocurrency?
I wouldn't say the same way everybody else, like Google. Yeah, but just yeah, that's where it starts, Google, and then I got into the cryptocurrency chat rooms where they're pretty brutal in there sometimes. It's like if any of you ladies are into cryptocurrency, please hop in because those guys can be nuts. Um, but it's just it was something I knew I needed to learn. And I'm a pull yourself up by your own bootstraps kind of a person. And if I want to do something, I just do it. It's my favorite slogan. Yes, it's a Nike slogan, but it works. Just do it.
When we were discussing, you also talked about how many how-to videos you watched and how many books you read. And I think having access to the resources is an important, yeah, being curious. Thank you. Um, so there was a question during registration process, and the question was, what do you think the purpose of life is? And what is your call to action to this group?
When she told me that question, I said, I love it. Because I love questions. Once again, I'm the why kid. So if somebody asks me a question, I absolutely love it. Um, so that question, I want to say for me, because obviously I can only speak for myself, is that the purpose of life, I want to say, is to love and serve each other, take care of each other, Um, just because that's what I've put on my shoulders that sometimes some people think is a little bit nuts and a little bit crazy because I do have these big dreams and big goals. But honestly, in life, when are you your happiest? Is it with when you're with your family, when caring family, because I know I've got a dysfunctional family too, but when you're with your friends, when you're with your close family members, and it's making each other happy. It's that exchange of happiness, that exchange of love, that exchange of care. When you know someone cares about you, how does that make you feel? Feeling is reciprocated. I say there's nothing better in the world. I think that's the purpose of life.
Um, Obviously, you've gone through a very interesting life. And you came out at the other end as an entrepreneur. Maybe you always were an entrepreneur. Um, but you had some lows and highs. During the lows, you mentioned that sounds really very difficult. So I'm just curious, how do you maintain your focus on where you want to go? What drives you? How do you do it?
Well, my drive comes from really just always have wanted to make the world better and have everybody around me be happy. To me, there's no reason why everyone around me shouldn't be happy. But to work through my lows, I want to say it's really just my own spirit or being spiritually grounded. I am not a heavily religious person, but I am very spiritual. And I live by the mantra that all things happen for a reason. And I'll tell you that didn't happen overnight because when I got out of my violent relationship and was living on the streets of San Francisco with two kids begging for change to eat, you definitely say, why me? And why now? And then about 5 years ago, my youngest son was abducted. And I say, why me? Why now? Why this? That as an example, because I was so heavy on everything happens for a reason. What's the reason? What's the answer? Come on, what's the answer? And finally, one day I had said it enough to myself that I realized, excuse me, that all things happen for a reason, but all things happen for a reason to the other person too. I was able to take that step back and say, this isn't just happening to me, this is happening to my son, this is happening to his father, because that's who he was taken by, this is happening to the judge in the case, this is happening to the attorneys. Once I was able to do that big pullback, then I was able to release that hurt, the anger that I was dealing with, and say, okay, wait a minute, how can I turn this into power? And what came out of that was I was speaking at the World Forum in The Hague, and there were officers there from the World Court, which was right across the street. And I told them about my case, and they were like, we're going to use this as a case study. Then I came back here and I posted about it on the foundation's Facebook page on how the situation unfolded. And that changed how shelters around this country addressed custody of children. And then on a local level, I reached out to violence, or excuse me, Futures Without Violence, which is the largest anti-violence nonprofit in the country. Talked to their director, and they have a program now that trains judges on domestic violence. Took myself out of the equation and realized that it touched more people than just me. I was able to turn that around and turn that into a powerful tool to help other people.
Thank you. I think I can ask one more question. We didn't talk about this, but I'm just curious. Can you tell us how you got involved with the United Nations and SF? How did that come about?
Okay, can we talk manifestations for a minute and goal setting? And again, the kid who wants to help. And I always looked at the United Nations as this body that, really tried to help people. I had a very idealistic view of it, obviously, when I was younger. And now older, seeing how things happen and learning, I said, you know what? I want to be a UN rep. One day I want to be a UN rep. I want to do enough to be able to be in the room, to have a voice, to make a difference. Because one of the things that I've learned since being in the nonprofit world, because obviously I didn't come from the nonprofit world. I didn't start off, volunteering for Peace Corps and doing a social studies or anything like that in college. I just fell into it just because I wanted to help people. So I see things from a very, very different perspective. I see holes and deficiencies where people who are dialed into the program, they don't see. Um, and so I just kept putting myself in the position and to make contacts, to network, because networking and who you know is important. I want to say in just about every aspect of life. And finally, I met the right person, and he just said, "You know what? I think you would be great on the board of directors here for United Nations Association San Francisco." And I met the chairperson, and she was like, "Yeah, you're kind of awesome." And then when I got there, it's like, wait a minute, you're so tied into women's issues. We want you to chair the women's committee as well for UNA Women. And I'm sure, I'm all about it. Anything I can do. Um, but really, it just comes from my desire to be a voice for other people, not so much my own, but I do realize that I have a unique vision, and the questions that I ask can be deep, for the lack of a better way to put it. And I'll even say that
Is being
it happens
recorded.
on a regular basis. I'll enter in a question and it'll come up, sorry. So I don't know, maybe they should hire me for their algorithm. But that's just how deep I go with my questions when I question the systems that are in place that are running the world. Because again, sometimes people put on blinders and they get so focused into doing something a particular way that they can't see out of it. And even then, on the just to speak more about that with regards to my nonprofit organization, obviously domestic violence, but all of my supporters are men. That surprises a lot of people. It goes into the psychology of domestic violence that I mentioned earlier, because us as women, we don't like to think about it. If we were victims, we absolutely want to leave that those bad memories behind. And so we don't want to face it. But for men, the men that support my organization, these are the little boys that couldn't help their mother. These are brothers that wanted to help their sisters, and fathers that want to keep their daughters protected. So these are the men who are the protectors, who understand the work from the boots on the ground standpoint, because they know we kind of come in hard, okay, and they don't mind it. And so that's my primary support, and that throws people. And I didn't know that at first. Once again, I walked into the nonprofit world completely not knowing anything, on a absolute learning curve, and I was following the reach out to women's organizations to get donations and have women's walks and women's talks and everything, woman centric. And it got me nowhere. But as soon as I started promoting muscle cars and sports cars, the engagement for my organization went up to 30,000 people. Knowing what questions to ask, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know, but even asking questions to figure out what you don't know can be key to moving forward.
So, can you talk a little more about your foundation? How does it work? And how is the technology is also part of it? That's something you mentioned to me.
Yeah, well, that was where I was going to say that's the opening of the rabbit hole. Like I said, was to scale the foundation because I knew I wanted it to be a global service. So, in the first 6 years of operating, it was by direct referral only. So, it was just shelters, police departments, county services, basically any business or organization that touched on domestic violence could reach out to my organization for help. Um, that got to be a bit much. And I'd always known that I wanted to create a community just for the service providers to interact themselves. So basically, pulling me out of the
position because I'd always been the middle person. This organization would call me and then I would call somebody else, and that's how it worked. So the core of what the foundation does is buy plane tickets, train tickets, bus tickets, gas, motel rooms, hotel rooms, really whatever it takes for a person to get from point A to point B. None of these things are donated either, by the way. Gas isn't donated, plane tickets aren't donated, nothing's donated. There's only a couple companies that do donations, but it's a process, it's a lot of hoops, and it's just not easy. Um, and then for the high threat clients, which I don't put out there majorly, but for the high threat clients, we actually provide security. So I like to say we're the Secret Service of domestic violence. I work with retired and off duty police officers and former military. We all have badges, we can all arrest, we're all armed. So, yes, I am a bodyguard. And I enjoy that very much. But that's the core of the services. But the technology, again, to scale this to a place where anyone in the world can find help. Any organization can reach out to another organization. I had to build a platform that was robust enough to connect all these people, but then also benefit them in a way of collecting the big data so that they have their own websites or their own resources or their own metrics. Because in order to get a grant, everybody wants to know your numbers. Your numbers are important. Is also giving them another resource to collect that data. So on the foundation website, we host the only fully interactive map for global resources available on the internet. But behind that, it's not just that surface. Behind that is my Salesforce, and we collect all that data. So organizations, if you click on an organization within my map, they're actually getting the data that you visited, how long you were there, if you called, who's coming to them, as well as their own ability in the background to network with another organization to provide a safety net of help. That safety net. So it was creating that safety net is where I had to get good and learn a lot.
And term payments also came out of this project, or?
Yeah, and I start with a smile because I have to, because this one's probably, this is the hardest story. I'm not gonna cry. I'm not. But with the new person in the White House, and I haven't written about this yet, I've been asked to. Once he secured the Republican nomination, domestic violence in this country went up 37%. So he not only empowered the other racist nuts and whatnot out there that exist, but he also encouraged toxic masculinity in the home. And domestic violence in this country just went through the roof. All organizations are slammed right now. Everybody's at capacity and has been at capacity now for the last couple years. To my organization, this was before I made the foundation publicly searchable on Google, because like I said, I was originally just referral only. So if you did find my organization, you were really looking for help. I mean, you were 5-6 pages deep into Google to find my organization. And I had started getting cold emails, but still having my referrals come in. Now, I started my organization to deal with the worst of the worst cases based on my own personal experience. And typically, I'd get 2 attempted murder cases per year. He was in the White House. I started getting attempted murder cases every day. Devastating. And it was hard for me and my donors to keep up. Because of the services that I provide, I don't qualify for grants from the big grant giving organizations. So it's individuals like you that support the work. And I had just been given a case out of, I'll just say in the Northwest because I can't give up details. I'll just say in the Northwest, where a woman had been, over the course of 2 days, had been beaten, stabbed, shot. Did everything to her he possibly could. And the only reason she lived is because she stopped moving. She had to play dead. At this time, I get an email, one of those cold emails from somebody looking for help. And it said, hid everywhere I could hide. He will find me. If he finds me, he will kill me. Please help. I didn't have the resources, and I would have only needed $300 to help her, but I couldn't because I was having this other client be released to me from the hospital after having her eye socket crushed, her jaw broken, stabbed, shot, the whole bit. Later, this woman's name was in the paper, and he had found her, and she was dead. And that hurt. I know my organization is the only one in the country that provides this service to be that safety net. And here was the prime example that I wasn't, I couldn't. And I couldn't because I didn't have $300. That sat me on my ass, and I cried for weeks. And I didn't want to open my email because I couldn't bear to tell anyone else no. I decided from there I never will. I won't tell anyone no again. And I'd had successful businesses before in the past. When I left my abusive relationship, at that time I was worth about $6 million, 7 years old. I built at that point 3 companies. Yes, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I was that kid that had the paper route, babysat, cleaned the local store, dog walked. And so I said, you know what? I need to go back into the for-profit world, figure out a business that's a cash cow to create an endowment for my nonprofit. And so brainstorming ideas for about 3 months. When I got to idea number 70, because I'm also a list person on my iPad, I got to number 70 is like, okay, Tracy, slow your roll. You need to figure out something here and go through this list and figure out what really resonates, what's really going to make the money to make this happen. And that's term payments. Because I don't know how many of you follow, but in the banking and finance industry, they're really trying to figure out how to get the unbanked or underbanked participating in the greater global economy, e-commerce, online sales, things of that nature. And I was actually looking on Net-a-Porter at home doing online retail therapy. And I found a pair of shoes that I wanted and I couldn't get them. I didn't have the money, didn't have the credit. And I had thought, well, if I could just put them on layaway, that was the light bulb moment. And real layaway, not layaway because some other people are microloans, microcredit, they're still checking your credit. No, this is straight layaway, no credit required. And then in my effort once again to be inclusive of everyone, I had this idea of, well, how can I let people do these purchases with cash? Come up with an idea for that actually works. And in talking to VCs and pitching, like everybody who does, has a startup do, all the VCs were focused in on, wait a minute, you have a way that people can shop online with cash? They're like, skip the skip the layaway part. And I was excited about the layaway part. They're like, skip the layaway part. You can shop online with cash. That opens up commerce to immigrants, to people who don't have banks, to people who don't have credit, to people who don't have or don't want to use reloadable cards, or to avoid those particular fees because those fees amount to billions of dollars every year. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna run with that. I'm still gonna do layaway. But having the ability for people to pay for any service they might find online by walking into several different types of physical locations and saying, here. So there's my moneymaker to fund my nonprofit. So I have a wallpaper on my iPad that's 100 million. That's my goal. This is the check that I want to write to my organization to establish an endowment.
And it's going well, I hope.
Yes.
That's a really inspiring story. Well, at this point, I would like to open up for questions. We have a microphone in the back, and also WebEx questions, and those who are moderating the chat will ask the questions here.
Thing. So one of the reasons why we did this talk today like this, instead of me getting up here and doing a full-on like keynote with the slides and clicking through, or doing a TED style talk, is because I like to be interactive, because I'm here today to serve you. That's why I'm here. And like I said, all things happen for a reason, and you never know what you don't know. And I just want to open up the conversation to anything. You guys have seen my bio, you've heard a little bit of my story, so feel free to ask about anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be tech related, because I'm here to support you in any way that I can. So any question is open, nothing is off limits.
Hi, I have a more basic question. I liked your layering. I think I'm getting a little bit of it. So what is the transaction from regular dollar to your cryptocurrency? Like, how does it convert it?
I have not established the conversion rate yet. I've played around with a few numbers. So at first, when Equal comes out, it will actually be a reward system on term payments, because term payments will have its own standalone website for you to shop. Like one of the things, because I'm a handbag girl, so like one of the things I'm gonna put out there for layaway is the Chanel 2.55. So anybody want a Chanel bag, you can get it through me. Um, but with what you purchase through term, um, for like every $100, you might be given 10 Equal, and that will be your entryway into the Equal or the Arinda sphere of purchasing.
Okay, so then and you can change that anytime. And so every time you give equal, then you're sort of printing your equal dollars, like equal currency?
Well, it will already be generated, and we've got $1 million of currency earmarked to give out through the term platform, and when to begin to have it in circulation.
And when you said that you want to write 100, whatever, like big check,
yeah,
that will be like a US dollars and converting into equal?
Yes, that will absolutely be in US dollars.
This whole conversation intrigues me, even though
Good.
some of it I don't understand. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I realize there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, there really is, like I said, a lot of moving parts. And the reason for that, because I've been told over and over again, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard it yourselves, focus on that one thing. That one thing. And that one thing, yes, you can accomplish a whole lot by focusing on one thing. But to me, when you're trying to solve an issue as big as poverty, you have to look at everything around it. So just putting in a well in a village, yes, that'll give them water, but what about education? What about health? What about housing? What about a roof over their head? What about the ground? What about transportation? What about all that? I don't knock the well, but will that really lift up the entire community? Will that really lift up the whole family? And it's like, no, what else do you need? You need to give them education. You need to give them health care. You need to give them adequate housing. You need to give them power. You need to give them food. So why not take care of everything at one time?
Serpil, maybe you know this. Is the foundation on our Bright funds for matching?
I don't believe so.
So maybe that's a takeaway, a call to action for us. In order to get a foundation added, you have to have a certain number of Cisco sponsors and come up with an amount of money for the initial donation, and then Cisco matches our donations. So Serpil, I'll work with someone to get that going, and expect an email, folks asking you to join and support so we can get it added to the list that our donations could be matched.
That's a great idea.
So fascinating story. Thank you so much for sharing that. How can, and maybe you're going to share this later, how can we actually, in light of also donating dollars, is there other volunteer opportunities or other campaigns that you're looking for help with? Maybe, I don't know if you're going to share that, but if you could, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously I do a lot of work with the United Nations Association of San Francisco. We have a very, very robust program, and everyone within the committee and the community, we have all kinds of issues. So obviously now I'm going to spear the women in tech within UNA for San Francisco. So there's going to be events there and speaking opportunities there and learning opportunities there, as well as dealing with other issues like homelessness, education, and because we have women come from all over the Bay Area to participate in that. So I want to say that's number one. The other is for my organization, because I am going to throw my hat in the ring again and have a couple fundraisers. I definitely could use some volunteers for that. And then because I like being in unusual places, and you'll see if you go to the Instagram or the website for the foundation, like I love going to music venues, music concerts, specifically metal. Um, yeah, be the only domestic violence, table set up at a metal concert. Uh, we have fun. But that's part of the thing, is be in the unusual places, be in the unexpected places, be a resource for people, when they're not even looking for it. So yes, so this is my contact information. You see my Milligan Foundation email, the term email, and then of course Twitter and Instagram. And I do respond. I respond to everybody. So please reach out.
Any other questions in the room?
Thank you for sharing your story with us. My question is, throughout your journey and trailblazing through all of these different disciplines and trying to care for the world in this way, how did you find your support system, and how do you find the people that you work with, either in the entrepreneurial journey or in an emotional support way, or in any other ways?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That is a good question, because it is hard to find support, especially when you're kind of like an alpha female, because a lot of people are intimidated by it. Some people don't understand it. Is like, why do you think that way? Oh my God, you're crazy. Stay over there. And really, it's women's empowerment organizations, like the Lean In. I'm a member of a few. It's like any good ones I find, I am absolutely there. For entrepreneur, I do Boss Babe, which funny name, but they're like with it and they're like so supportive. My own personal mentor, who I just spent the past 5 days with, Sharon Lecter. She's amazing. She was a financial advisor for Clinton, Bush, and Obama. She's an amazing person to just, hey, I have a question. Or like I said, this weekend, I just spent the whole weekend with her. Her and her husband have a ranch in the Arizona mountains. Is 40,000 acres. It's like I've never ridden a horse for 3 hours and still been on the same property. I was like, oh my God. And just, and it's really just finding your tribe. You may have heard that term used before, but it is the absolute truth. Put yourself out there and find your tribe, because there are other women looking for you. Because I will tell you, I don't have support in my family at all. Not none, not a little bit. I have one cousin who just says, "Yay, go," and he has no idea what he's saying "yay, go" about. but he's quite literally the only one. And so yeah, find a local women's organization, meetup group. I do meetups. I do, gosh, what else have I done? I like really, I really look for those organizations that offer help and support for you at anything. Um, like I said, hiking groups, I do sailing groups, I do, like I said, I do all kind of groups to do all of my activities. I find out who my tribe is, where they are, and build relationships from that. Again, another women's group called EBW 2020, and that is Empowering a Billion Women by 2020. And we had the first meeting a couple years ago called Billionaire Business Women's Weekend, and it was an amazing weekend for women entrepreneurs. And what it was a true mastermind. And if you're aware about the concept of the mastermind, is when a group gets together and you basically problem solve for each other. You take a topic, or each of you have something, and you use the group to figure out the problem. And so this was a mastermind for businesswomen. And at the table was one billionaire businesswoman, one multimillionaire businesswoman, one businesswoman in tens of millions, another businesswoman in the hundreds of thousands, and then a startup. And we come together and talk about business ideas, implementation, all together at one table. And that kind of business networking and connection was incredible. And that's where I found my coworker. We met, and you know how you know when you meet your own people, it's like you're my friend forever. And that's how Kirsten and I were. Just like we started talking, and I looked at her. Like I said, I'm a very spiritual person. I pay attention to energies, and I looked at her. I said, "You were a cousin in a past life, so we're family now."
We have time for two more questions, Serpil. One here.
Hi, Tracy. Thanks for coming. So my question is, when you think back to that 2.5 years when you were living on the streets with your kids, and you look at what you've built today, do you think that you've created the resources that you would have needed? Have you provided everything that you would have needed at that time?
Yes, thank you for asking that. And thank God, yes, I have. And I will tell you, so once again, when I talk, and I'm talking specifically about domestic violence, I tell the story of the services that my organization provides. And when I was able to finally get into a shelter and get to the end shelter I was at, it was for women just like myself who were actively being hunted, whose abusers had specifically said, "Okay, we're going to kill you. We want you dead." So it was a truly underground shelter. And when you live in a shelter, counseling therapy is mandatory because of the trauma you've been through. And so we would have the circle, conversations, and you'd hear the stories from other women of what it took for them to get there. There was one woman in the shelter, she literally hitchhiked across the country to be safe. But the story that I tell is there was one woman who had 6 children, and her husband, upon having her 6th child, her husband picked her up from the hospital, took her home, got high, duct taped her to a chair, set her on fire. And she needed to go to a major burn center, and the doctor at that burn center looked at her medical history and saw all of her injuries and said, "Okay, this isn't normal. This is abuse. Do you want out?" And she said, "No, no, no, I can't. I don't have any money. I don't have any education. I don't have a job. I've never worked. I've got 6 children. What am I going to do?" And he said, "No, I can put my counselor, the hospital counseling, on it." And that counselor knew the director of the shelter that I was staying in at that time and said, "Hey, I have a client who has 6 kids. She needs to get away." And the shelter I was in at that time was funded by some very deep pockets. And the director called a donor who had the Black American Express and said, "I have a client that needs to fly halfway across the country with 6 kids." And they utilized that Black American Express and got those 7 one-way tickets. And that's how she got out. And from that story alone, I said the connection of instances that had to happen to know be in the right hospital and talk to the right doctor and have the right counselor who knew this person in order to get her and her kids safe. I said that kind of resource needs to be available to every shelter. What I did.
Very much for sharing your story. Just a quick question on what impact did it leave on your kids, and how did they cope with all your difficulties and what you're doing today?
That's a really good question. So, for my oldest son, who was 7 at the time, he that's almost a whole nother talk. Um, so trauma, because I know a lot of people talk about trauma these days and how it affects children in their development. And his father actually wanted him to see everything he did to me. He told him his father's mantra is better to be feared than loved because fear gets more accomplished. So my oldest son and I have a very different kind of relationship because he was programmed at a very young age to talk to me a certain way, relate to me a certain way. Has almost a touch of disrespect and disregard, but he doesn't do that with other females. But he's also a huge um, advocate against domestic violence. He's intervened when he's seen random arguments on the street, heard arguments coming from his apartment complex. He'll go bang on somebody's door. Hey, this doesn't sound right. And it's definitely shaped all of his relationships. He's 28 now. He'll be 29 next month, and it has absolutely shaped all of his relationships. Um, Even though he always has a touch of disrespect for me, just underlying. There's also that thing of the connection that we have because we were on the street together, because we were in the shelter together, that he always has my back no matter what. And he knows I always have his. So it's created a really kind of tight bond between us because of what we've been through. Now, my other son, who at the time when I first started staying on the street was only 4 months old. Um, he doesn't remember. He doesn't remember any of it. Um, because at that point, like I said, once he got older, I was in a home and, all that. But he looks at what I do now, and especially my youngest son. So I have a son who's 17. He'll be 18 in 2 weeks, and I take him with me now when I go to conferences and things, or I tell him about, like, here today. He knows what I'm doing today, um, and just trying to instill in him the reasons why and how one person can make a difference. It's just having that willingness to step up, which he has too. Um, he was brought home by the police one day. I was looking out the window, and here comes this cop car pulling up in front of the house, and I was like, "Oh Lord," this is what happens when you have sons. And and he gets out the car, and the police officer gets out with him, and he says, "Ma'am, you should be proud of your son. A woman was getting robbed, and he took on two of the assailants by himself." And he was 15 at this time. So make an impact. I do have to share my life with my kids, especially being a single mom. It's teamwork. It's teamwork. And I try not to shelter them from a whole lot just because this is the world. And you have to face it, and you have to have the truth. You have to face the truth.
Thank you so much.
Ray said I could ask one last question.
There you go.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Drew.
How are you?
This is my friend who I said told them about me to have me come.
Tracy and I have known each other, what,
25,
26 years?
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of what you've gone through in the last 2.5 decades, and great admiration for things that you've done and worked your way through all the adversity. And your experiences through a wide range of events have formed a lot of great things that you're doing. And as we look at the direction you're going now, like in Haiti, you're working to improve the life of the impoverished and bringing them more into today's world. As technologists, engineers, and software developers, we see this also as a great opportunity to bring newer technologies into them and giving them insights into the world. But it also brings in significant amount of risk because of those we see from various places in the internet around the world prey on people. Where do you see as your responsibility in protecting them from the risk? But also conversely, what do you see as our responsibility to help protect those new to the technology and new to the world, the first world problem?
Good question, as always, Drew. With that, I will go to the phrase of a brother's keeper. And I say that going back to what is the point of life? Is to take care of each other and care for each other. And so I believe in order to put systems in place, that has to be the first question. Kind of like the redundant question that I think they're still trying to figure out with AI, so that when AI goes live, it doesn't just obliterate us all. Is, does this do good? Does this really help? Is the best use? Oftentimes what we think is what someone needs isn't what they need at all. You have to listen, and you perhaps have to, if you know that you can't listen, and you know that you can't ask those questions, definitely use somebody who can. We can all do more together, and obviously something as big as Arinda and as audacious and such massive goals, I'm definitely not doing it by myself. And I have to have the help of everyone to do it. But the first is that you have to come from an authentic place of really wanting to help. Difference. Like I said, help in an authentic way, help in a way that is not selfish, but also help in a way that's thoughtful, where you are helping people where they are. And that's also another reason why my organization doesn't have a lot of funding, is because I know from my personal experience that just handing me $50 is going to cut getting me 400 miles to a shelter. Acknowledging that to help people where they are is how you help them the most.
Thank you so much. And I know we are way over our time, so I just want to thank Tracy for taking the time to come today. And thank you all for coming.